Hey guys! So, finally I'm back from Amsterdam, only to go away for another week again during the second week of December, this time to Prague. A final push before the holiday season, just to make sure I don't get bored. And to make sure that you don't get bored either, I have been really busy outside my meetings as well. I could get my hands on a really cool webcam and a complete green screen set as well, so I should be able to set up and test my stream on Twitch in the next days and roll it out when I'm back from Prague. Now, in the beginning, I will probably have to rely on Twitter announcements instead of an actual fixed schedule, but I will let you know for sure in due time. Right now, however, we have some other cool stuff to look into, namely the review of the Tier IX American heavy tank, the famous M103. Now this is an interesting one. If you look at the comments about the M103 online, the opinions are perhaps even more split as usual, with some absolutely despising the tank and some saying that it's one of the best in the game. Now, as usual, there is truth to both opinions, and during the review we will check the reasons for it more closely as well, but I can already say that there will be situations that this heavy just can't really handle that well. Then again, if you look at the Ace Tanker gameplay after the review, it's also clear that in other situations it's absolutely monstrous. Speaking about the Ace Tanker gameplay, if you are only interested in the action, that timestamp stands ready as usual in the description below. As for the rest of us, let's see how the M103 did serve in real life. Now, the M103 was in service only for a relatively short period of time during the Cold War era, after the Korean War, so we can't really sing ballads about its heroic past. It did play an important role though in the American tank development, as it's actually one of the last real heavy tanks, as slowly the era of the main battle tanks approaches, starting with the M60 patent that did actually relieve the M103 in service with the US forces. Oh, and by the way, if you were wondering what the main difference between heavy tanks and main battle tanks is, the MBTs, also called battle tanks or universal tanks, are actually versatile armored fighting vehicles with the armor and armament of a heavy tank, but also combined with the mobility of a medium tank. Now, this change in tank development comes all down to real-life gold ammunition. High explosive anti-tank, or in short heat ammunition, became more and more powerful and widely used by all nations, so after a while it was actually just not effective anymore to try to increase the protection by plain armor thickness, as the tanks would have become way too heavy and immobile to be really effective. Instead, the development focused on mobility and lighter composite armor. Now, it might come as a surprise to some of you, but the official tank classification of the US forces did actually already abandon the terms of light, medium and heavy tank already by 1950, and instead of looking at the weight, they actually reclassified the tanks by the size of their guns, creating the categories 76mm, 90mm and 120mm, though to shorten things the usual expressions light, medium and heavy did actually remain widely used later on as well. Who said the size of your gun doesn't matter? But back to the M103. Designing these heavy tanks had a very specific purpose: to counter the threat of the Soviet heavy tanks that, and let's be honest here for a second, were way ahead of the British and American heavy tanks by the end of the Second World War. The USA basically had M4 Shermans boosting a 75 and later a 76mm gun, and just at the end of the war, the M26 Pershing heavy tank did enter service as well with its 90mm gun, and they would have to face IS-3s. It's no wonder then that the Allied forces were really keen to come up with something that could counter this threat. The British came up with the Conqueror heavy tank, and the US designers started to work on the T-29, T-30 and T-34 concepts. Now, none of these actually did make it past the drawing board or prototype stage, but they eventually led to the production of a limited series of 300 tanks bearing the code T-43E1, using a 120mm modified former anti-aircraft gun. As for the success of this T-43E1 concept, well, it was for all intents and purposes a failure. After the unsuccessful testing, they actually had to be put in storage up until 98 approved modifications were done, and they could finally enter service bearing the M103 designation. Now, of these 300, 80 were used by the US Army, but the bulk of it went actually to the US Marine Corps. where it was further improved, creating the M103A1 and M103A2 versions that were used as an infantry support tank. Right then, I would say let's jump straight in the middle of our inspection with one of the main features of this tank, that amazing 120mm gun. Oops, spoiler alert! It's no wonder then that the stock grind in this vehicle is so painful. You really need the gun upgrades to be able to truly appreciate the M103. It has a very solid 258mm of penetration in its standard AP ammunition and a relatively lower alpha damage of only 400 per shot. It's really the secondary stats though that make this gun so much fun to shoot. That 5.36 rounds per minute rate of fire is one of the very best at this tier, and that's combined with a very comfortable 2.3 second aim time and an alright 0.37 meter dispersion. Now all of these stats really allow you to keep up the sustained, reliable damage, giving you one of the best DPMs among the Tier 9 heavies. If you can keep that gun firing, the damage will start to pile up really fast. Now where it gets a lot less fun, and where most of the people actually get annoyed with this tank, is the armor, which is quite complex actually. First of all, however, let's get something straight out of the way. This is an American heavy through and through, so that means that your sides and rear on both your hull and turret are utter garbage. With only 44mm of armor on the hull, both on the sides and the rear, it's definitely not side-scraping material, and that huge turret with 99mm on the side and only 53mm in the back isn't exactly bulletproof either. Really, even light tanks can give you serious problems, not to mention HE shells. That's right, this thing handles incoming artillery fire really badly, as even splash can get easily through your armor, and then we did not even mention the huge weak top part of the turret and the hull. But it's not all bad news. From the front you can actually be pretty tough, well, in some places at least. Starting with your hull, if you are shooting at these things, avoid the beak of the tank at all costs. Here it will exceed 300mm of armor, while the lower plates have only around 200 and the upper plates around 220mm of protection. Now the very bottom of the lower plate is actually a weak spot with only 130mm of armor, but it's a rather tricky one to hit, and there are much better places to shoot this tank. Quite like the prominent turret ring and the commander's cupola, where only 120 to 130mm of protection is that all it will take to go through the front of this tank. Now the turret front otherwise is mostly good. The gun mantlet is actually pretty brutal, and thanks to all the angling, the sides of the turret frontally are really tough as well with over 400mm of protection. Now the issue is really with the cheeks of the turret next to the gun mantlet, but they only have 230mm of armor, so high caliber guns can just power their way through it. And that's really the issue with this tank. Being a Tier 9 heavy, it will encounter a lot of guns that will have really no problem going through its armor even from the front in a lot of places, and the rest can simply aim for weak spots or just load heat. It's not to say that you can't really bounce any shots. Sometimes that rounded frontal hull armor can be pretty trollish, but against a certain circle of opponents it's just not really reliable. And that's why you will have games on both ends of the spectrum. Amazing ones where you just roll through the opposition like a champion, and brutal ones where you end up getting shredded without any real effort from the enemy team. Now, if you put yourself in those spots, that is. Now, the rest of the stats are rather comfortable, even if not amazing. Top speed at 34 km per hour with a 13.8 horsepower per ton power to weight ratio is actually quite good for a heavy tank. And you will feel rather mobile, especially as you also have a very nice 32 degrees per second turret traverse and an alright 28 degrees per second hull traverse. Well, no real complaints here. Also, view range at 390 meters and signal range at 745 meters are dead average as well, so no nasty surprises here either. So the key to driving this thing in my opinion is then to really try to avoid head-on engagements against guns that you just can't handle. Play it more like a big medium in these instances, if you have the choice of course. As for all other moments, you are a truly scary heavy tank that can DPM its opposition into the ground while bouncing shots left, right and center, at least from the front. Equipment-wise, I would suggest a gun rammer, vertical stabilizers and vents to push that DPM advantage even further. And as for crew skills, I suggest repairs, Six Sense and Brothers in Arms. Later on, you might look into snapshot, wet stowage and clutch braking as well. Alright then, I think we all have some statistics overload already, so let's roll out and show those punks the true power of the M103. So, here we are in our M103 and we got Erlenberg in the map rotation. Looking at the team lineup, we can really rub our hands together, because this is a really sweet matchup. First of all, it's more a tier 8 match than a tier 9, there are actually very few tier 9 machines on both sides. So mostly we will be battling it out against tier 8s and tier 7s, which means that the M103 has a chance to really shine. And also, looking at the players, it seems that most of the better players are actually on this side. There you go, green team. But that doesn't mean we have to be reckless. Far from it, there are some seriously dangerous guns on the enemy team, starting with that Object 704, and also the ISU 152 and the Jagdpanther 2s with their top guns are definitely something that we really don't want to be on the receiving end of. Now, beginning of the match, we head to the typical heavy engagement zone. We'll try to battle it out with the enemy heavy tanks among this ruin. Now, it seems that most of the heavies did come with us, so we have a really good chance to set up a really strong defense here. Now, there is only one artillery on the enemy team, a GW Panther, who doesn't seem to be the sharpest tool in the box, at least by the stats. But A, he can get lucky, and B, all the tank destroyers will pretty much point their guns this way, so we have to be careful. First shot out, trying to get the lower glazes of that IS-6, which unfortunately bounces, so that's not a good start. And he's pulling back, but there will be plenty of targets to shoot here. Now we don't want to get shot ourselves, so let's see. Oh, I don't know what that IS-8 was thinking he's doing, but going sideways on against the whole enemy team is a rather interesting tactic. He was actually angling, well, I don't think he was doing it on purpose, but he was turning, so we only did blew his tracks off. But that's actually a really good position to be in. I really don't know where that one went, but he's still there, he's still stuck, so we should be able to get the killing blow. Well, 60 HP short, nonetheless that's a really dangerous tier 9 tank gone from the enemy team. And it seems that the others are actually trying to make a push here from the lower ground, which is not bad. Panther 88 just committing suicide. I'm sorry, that was just ridiculous. Now we have to be careful about tank destroyers in the back. Oh, there they are. There is the ISU and there is actually the T-54 which is trying to snipe from the back. And that was a rather lucky shot from the T-29 that was pulling back. And again, I really have the upper hand here. I have the better gun, I have the better armor. But that doesn't mean I should be reckless and throw my health away, because I could very well need it against the T-54 and against the Object 704. So slowly, but carefully, I'm whittling the health of these enemy tanks down. I really want to take that T-54 out, or at least take some of its health out, but he's pretty well cooled down, so let's turn our attention back to the heavy tanks. Okay, so T-29 is out, and there is a full health IS-6. Well, it's not so healthy anymore, but there you go, we've actually taken some damage. And look at the rate of fire on this tank. Every couple of seconds we get to bite a really big, juicy bit out of this IS-6, who is just melting away. And I don't know what's with jumping on heavy tanks in medium and light tanks from above today, but that was the T-37 committing suicide in a really fashionable way. Okay, so that Jagdpanther 2 doesn't seem to have the perk that lets you know if you get spotted or he just doesn't care, which we will reward with a second shot. Now it's really time to push ahead. No more targets to shoot, we have the upper hand, so let's push our advantage. Luckily that IS-6 is on very high health as well, so we should be able to really grind these guys down without any remorse. Now first things first, I really want to come behind that T-54 and give him some surprise buttocks a la Jingle style. Now that was this Jagdpanther 2, but he seems to have completely retreated, so that should give me the option to take this guy out without even stopping. Now where did that Jagdpanther 2 go? Oh, there he is, and he's a one-shot kill. Now it's only 2 enemy tanks left, and I really want to get this over with quickly, so I can get a bite out of that object as well. So, of course, I messed this one up, and this means that I will lose some health, which is quite unfortunate. But I reload quicker, so that means that we get the kill. Unfortunately, no Top Gun in this game. Just not enough enemy tanks left, but with almost 6,000 damage, I think we can call it a fairly successful run. Now it would be really nice if we could get a bite out of the juicy Object 704. We try not to be completely shut down by him, but he takes a big one from the Jagdtiger. So it seems that, unfortunately, this is all the damage we are going to do in this matchup. Still, I think it's fair to say that we did our part, so no complaints overall. So, that was a cool little game done in the M103. I mean, don't get me wrong here. There was absolutely nothing spectacular about my performance personally, but I think this replay could show you how this tank is capable to perform under the right conditions. If you don't have to face high-penetration guns in close-quarters combat, you really have an amazing machine under your hands that is capable of dishing out some sustained punishment. Talking about punishment, we really did slap the enemy team around with our 120mm gun, causing close to 6,000 damage ourselves and even participating in 1,000 assisted damage. Our reward was an ace tanker and high caliber award, together with 4 smoking wrecks that we did leave in our wake. Now all this carnage was enough to collect over 76,000 credits and 1,258 base XP, which, by the way, was not enough to get the top spot by XP earned as well. Now that particular glory goes to the great player in the IS-6, which cheeky bastard did almost half the damage than us, so he must have gotten a ton of assisted damage additionally. Well done to him. As for our shooting, although 18 of the 20 shots fired hit the target, only 15 penetrated as well, so we could have probably aimed a little more carefully sometimes. At the same time, our armor did hold up really well in this situation, blocking 5 of the 7 shots received, worth almost 2,000 damage. It's confirmed then. The M103 is a good tank, you just have to know when you are the bully and when you run the risk of being bullied yourself. Right, this was my quick review on the M103, the Tier IX American heavy tank. I hope you did like it. If you did, thank you for considering giving it a like or sharing it. Later this week there will be another episode of funny moments from World of Tanks, and I will also prepare a little something for you guys for next week when I will be away once again. There are also some rather exciting news on the horizon, so stay tuned, people. Have an excellent week, and I see you on the battlefield.